Hi, welcome back to Untold History. My name's Abby.
My name's Jillian.
And today we are covering the Jonestown mass suicide. So Jonestown mass suicide took place November 18th, 1978 in Guyana. 918 people died at the hand of a cult leader named Jim Jones, and 909 were members of this cult named the People's Temple. Some background on Jim Jones is he was born May 13th, 1931. Over time would gain the name of a cult leader, preacher, and mass murderer. However, he was born in Crete, Indiana, in a very small town. His family lived in deep poverty, particularly during the Great Depression, and his parents showed no interest in raising their son. Since he was neglected and often hungry, he left to rely on neighbors' help. Specifically, a woman named Miss Myrtle Kennedy. Myrtle was the first person to take young Jones to church. There he became captivated by the preacher. From then, Jones began attending every church in town. Jones developed an affinity for Pentecostalism and a desire to preach. What Jones liked most about the preacher was that they had power and control and emotion over who that they were speaking to. This is why he was so captivated by preachers. And even as a child, Jones had disturbing curiosities. He would preach to imaginary congregations from a tree stump and even hold mock funerals for dead animals. He went so far that if he could not find any dead animals, he would kill one himself just to hold the ceremony. Despite his neighbors' kindness, Jones often forced his neighbors to come to his fake services, and he would threaten them if they tried to leave. On some occasions, locking a neighbor in a barn and shooting a friend with a BB gun. Jones always had an unsettling need to control and dominate others, a trait that would unfortunately grow with his age. He was described as a charismatic churchman who established the People's Temple in the 1950s. He became known for his psychic abilities of being able to tell the future and heal the sick, both of which were proven false. Jones distinguished himself through civil rights activism, where he preached against racism, which ultimately attracted many African Americans. He was known for his charity work and for founding one of the first mixed-race churches in the Midwest.
Okay, some information about the People's Temple, which was the name of the group that he established. The group started in Indiana in 1950 and moved to California in 1965. And contrary to knowing the story, members were not actually crazy. They were just drawn to Jones because he promised equality in community. Behind closed doors, the group embraced socialism, which is a political and economic theory of social organization, which advocates for the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned and regulated by the community as a whole. And they hoped that in time the country would be ready to accept the much stigmatized theory. Not long after, Jones became very paranoid. His speeches began to reference a coming doomsday and nuclear apocalypse brought by government mismanagement. However, continued to enjoy popular support and strong relationship with the day's leading politicians, including First Lady Rosalind Carter and California Governor Jerry Brown. The media was beginning to turn on him. In 1974, their group faced backlash against accusations of financial fraud, physical abuse of its members, and mistreatment of children. Paranoid Jones persuaded his people to move to Guyana with him, where he promised to build a socialist utopia. They settled in Guyana, a country that appealed to Jones because of its non-extradition status and its socialist government. Guyana's authorities rarely allowed the cult to begin construction on their utopia compound, and in 1977, the People's Temple arrived to take up residence. However, Guyana was not what Jones had promised and was instead a brutal life for members, as they were assigned to torturous, unpaid labor and terrible conditions. Temple members had limited communication to the outside world. There were armed guards, and they confiscated their passports. Jones himself was said to be losing a grip on reality. His health was deteriorating, and by the way of treatment, he began taking a nearly lethal combination of amphetamines and pentobarbital. A survivor recalled, quote, "He would tell us that the United States African Americans were being herded into concentration camps, that there was a genocide on streets. They were coming to kill and torture us because we'd chosen what he called the socialist track. He said they were on their way," end quote. Jones had fake emergency drills called the White Knights suicide rehearsals, and he would give them, elixirs of what they ended up dying on, and he would say that they were poisonous, and once they drunk it, he would oh, no, it's not poisonous. He was basically just trying to see
trial runs.
How loyal they were.
Mm-hmm. Now, on November 18th, the day that everything happened, Jones commanded everyone to gather in the main pavilion for what he called a revolutionary act. Quote from Jim Jones the day of the mass suicide was, quote, "Die with a degree of dignity. Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay down with tears and agony. I tell you, I don't care how many screams you hear. I don't care how many anguish cries. Death is 1,000,000 times preferable to 10 more days of this life. If you knew what was ahead of you, you'd be glad to be stepping over tonight," end quote. The youngest members were the first to die, as parents and nurses used syringes to drop cyanide mixed with fruit powder into the children's mouths. Adults then lined up to drink the poison as armed guards surrounded the pavilion. Cyanide poisoning is an exposure from cyanide that starts with headaches, dizziness, fast heart rate, shortness of breath, and vomiting. These then turn into seizures, slow heart rate, low blood pressure, loss of consciousness, and cardiac arrest. 5 representatives, Lee O'Brien, NBC correspondent Don Harris, NBC soundman Bob Brown, newspaper photographer Greg Robinson, and Temple defector Patty Parks, were shot to death at the Port Catamar's airstrip. 4, Sharon Amos and her children, Lyanne Harris, Christina Amos, and Martin Amos, died at the People's Temple House in the Lahama Gardens in Georgetown. The remaining 909 died in Jonestown. 909 members of the People Temple that died. A third were children. The youngest victim was 1 day old, and the oldest was 76.
Concerned family had complained to the U.S. government, so Congressman Leo Ryan went down there with a couple of journalists. This was the only time in history that a congressman was killed in the line of duty. He was shot. The saying, "drink the Kool-Aid," basically comes from this tragic event.
There was some survivors, one being Tracy Parks, a 12-year-old survivor. She was survived by running into the jungle after her father commanded her to and seeing the chaos. Parks says, quote, "This wasn't suicide, this was murder. Those children didn't want to die, and neither did many of the adults," end quote. Jim Jones didn't take the cyanide poisoning that he had given to the People's Temple. He was found with a bullet in his head from himself. While everybody had to go through a slow and painful death at the hands of Jones, he got out on his own in a quick way. We are actually going to put in the comments of the names of people who died for anyone who wants to go and look at that. And there is pictures of the events and of the people.
They're slightly disturbing.
They are very disturbing. That's why we're not including them in here, but look at your own risk. And
It is a very interesting story, though.
It is. I mean, just to talk about it a bit, I guess, before we end the video, it was really... It's an event in history that I had found out about my freshman year of high school, and I had never heard of it before, and many people haven't. And the few people who have, I was talking to my mom about this yesterday, and she thought it was only about 100 people who had passed away. And so when I told her that it was 909 that were specifically in the temple, I mean, it's crazy to think about, just because, I mean, he really did, obviously a cult's not going to admit that they're a cult, but these people really believed that he was going to give them a good life and that he was going to help them get away from the racist stereotypes in America and everything else that was going on. And really it ended up in one of the most tragic mass suicides, especially because he didn't, cyanide poisoning is a very slow and painful death. And when people found them, when actual Congress members and stuff like that went to go investigate, they were expecting to be met at the airstrip with armed guards ready to attack them the way that the other people had been killed. But they showed up, and there was a quote that literally said that it was just dead silent, that they showed up and they were wondering where everybody was, and then they walked around and just saw everybody on the floor hugging their family members after they had died. So it is a very terrible, sad way to start off our podcast, but I mean, it is definitely a very big story, and obviously there are still cults that are going on today, but I think that it is just something to learn from and to just really put into people's minds for the people who don't know, because there was a lot of people who lost their lives to this. A lot of people, and most were children who they didn't willingly go in there. Their parents may have been born in the camps, and it wasn't.
One of the victims was 1 year old.
Mm-hmm. There was
not even 1 year old.
1 year old. 1 day old. 1 day old. That was the youngest victim. So, yeah, but this is the Jonestown mass suicide. We hope and we thank you for listening to our podcast. Please subscribe and like and comment and all the things. Comment, like I said, if you have anything that you want us to do any research on, if there's a topic that you find interesting that not many people know about, we are welcome to look into it. We are open to any suggestions.
Or if you have any questions about this or other podcast episodes, we will answer.
Yeah, please let us know. But
either in the comments or in the next episode.
Exactly. Thank you.